Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of A.IdlePodcast, the podcast where I do weekly book reviews. This week, I read No Exit by Taylor Adams. This fiction thriller, published in 2017 by William Morrow, which is an imprint of HarperCollins, is the story of a conflicted young woman who stumbles into a literal horror plotline. This is a battle between one very clear victim, the hero, and the bad guy. The trouble for the audience is determining the good from the bad, who belongs to what side, and how many of each there are. Taylor Adams has released other works, including Hairpin Bridge, Our Last Night, and Eyeshot, so he is a pro at this writing thing. The premise is we have 5 strangers, one deplorable crime, all taking place at the Wanashono rest stop mid-blizzard. So they're all stuck there due to this winter storm. Now the book is only 350 pages, and what I find is when you have a genre like a thriller or a mystery or like a murder mystery, honestly, the page count doesn't really matter because you get so hooked onto it if it's good writing that you just kind of, keep reading until you get to the end and you lose track of time. Now, the chapters are time-stamped. They're not numbered. What this does is it indicates the timeline and the setting for the reader, but it also shows in highlighting the time the importance of it. So, we have to go into reading this book understanding that the chapters are not titled by timestamps for no reason. It's pretty significant that you understand where these events are taking place in the timeline. And that's mainly because of the weather. So the snow kind of helps drive the suspense because they're all stuck there because of the snow. And in order to remove themselves from that situation, they need the snow to be gone. And so waiting for help to arrive or waiting for it to stop snowing, that's something that is pretty important for the story. And it also depends on, obviously what time of night it is. Now, this does all take place under 13 hours. I think it's about 12 hours, but that's why, again, the timing is important. There's way more than 13 chapters. I didn't even count it because I didn't feel like it was necessary. But once you get towards the end and the minutes start meaning more, you'll find that the updates come like maybe every 3 minutes or something like that. Whereas in the beginning, you may have a chapter titled 6:24 p.m. and the next chapter will be titled maybe 8:30 p.m. or something like that. So time is very important here, and it helps that in the beginning of the chapter narrative, we understand where we are. Now, time is also reinforced by the page breaks. And that is, there are 5 of them. So there is dusk, night, midnight, witching hours, and dawn. So that's just another thing kind of to pinpoint where we are in the story. I didn't really think, I like the style of it. I didn't really think it was significant because we have the time period stamped on the chapters, but it definitely drives home that you need to be paying attention to what time it is. So the book is written in third-person narration. What this means is that we're able to switch which character we're following in order to gain information, but also Adams kind of uses that to his advantage to maintain the suspense. You may leave off with one character towards the end of a chapter, and then the next chapter you're switching to someone else, a completely different perspective. So we know the thoughts and the motives of the characters, but we don't really know what's going to happen next. So we're in the present moment but we're aware of everything that's going on. Okay, so characters, I was gonna map out every character because there's not a lot of them, but honestly, there's really only two that matter, probably because they are so opposite of each other. So Darby is essentially our protagonist. This is the first character we are introduced to. She's also the character that kind of jumpstarts the plot. So once she gets to this location, that's when everything starts happening. I would classify her as a dynamic character because we do see her journey to selflessness throughout this book, and how her decisions change, and her evaluation of the situations around her helped her make decisions that weren't necessarily in her best interest, but for the sake of other people. And of course, this is, commonly known as the hero. So that's how I would classify Darby. Certainly someone who is good, and someone who just stumbled into the plot, unfortunately. Now, what's interesting about her, following her character throughout the story, is that her realizations amp the intensity in the story. So we're with her for a good portion of it. And what we see is that she has a lot of internal analysis going on. And this provides character arc explanations on the people around her just by her picking up on things or noticing certain quirks about a character. She's able to very well, keep a running list of the traits of the people around her, of their possible motives, possible intentions, and use that to position herself in a better spot in order to survive, because that's really what it comes down to in this book, is survival. She also, her internal revelations lead to cracking the code to the mystery. So there's a lot that we do not know. And the more you read, the more you understand that you don't really know anything. But by following, her strategizing throughout, we're able to start putting the pieces slowly together. So the more, and it's funny because the farther you get into the book, the more we kind of branch off to follow different characters. And at that point, it's like, listen, we're getting so much from Darby. Like, let's just stick with her, because she clearly has an eye for people. She understands how people work and what their next move could be based on how they're acting right now. And so it was like something would come together, or something would begin to come together, and then we would switch to another perspective. So that's pretty funny, but that's also another kind of, I guess you could say, literary tool to keep the reader engaged. And now, Ashley. Ashley, it's very interesting. Ashley is certainly chaotic evil, period. And that's because he has very fluid motives. And so I never even, once I got towards the end of the book, I never could classify him as good versus bad. Now, he did a lot of good and bad things in the book, but to me, his motives shifted, certainly within self-interest, but it didn't seem like he was ever malicious. And if you've read that book, that's going to sound like a crazy hot take, but I do think that most of his actions came from the intention to get what he wanted, or have someone act the way that he wants them to act, which is certainly not okay, but he had, his reasons. So this is someone who is like that type of scary intelligence. He is also able to read people very well, And what we see is him and Darby play this game. It's like this internal chess game of strategizing and just mapping out the other person's moves so they can put themselves ahead. And so they're playing this game with each other throughout the entire book because they're both equally adept in reading people. So I guess that's a very general way to say it, but he's also someone who is very alpha. He gives the orders and he expects those orders to be followed. And when they're not, he does some very chaotic, evil stuff. So there's some type of sensibility in what he does, but his measures are certainly extreme. But I don't know. I don't think this is someone that can be classified as a bad guy, period. I don't know. But anyway, he also has a very annoying habit of communicating via metaphors and misdirection. So I would hate to be around this person because everything that they're saying has a double meaning. You never want to be around someone who is having a seemingly normal conversation with you, but everything that they're saying when you play it back in your head is giving you an entirely different story because there's always like an underlying meaning. So I guess you could say he's a wolf in sheep's clothing, which is interesting because he's also sort of a narcissist who has to have his way. So he's a very complex character, I would say. He's certainly more bad than good, but I just don't know where he falls on the moral scale. I think he just is full of himself, and that's kind of it. But he's very self-aware at the same time. In giving one of these metaphorical story explanations of whatever the heck he was talking about, he aligned himself with monsters, with things like Godzilla. So it's very clear how he sees himself and how he wants the world to see him, but I don't know. He's a very complex character. I do not think that you can just describe him with the word bad. Now, I will say this. We're going to touch on the film adaptation in just a second, but the film and the book are very different. In the film, he's just bad. In the book, there's a little bit more to him, and not like the whole, oh, he has a traumatic childhood kind of thing. Like he knows right from wrong, but he also carries a nail gun around. I don't know. He's complex. Okay, so there are a couple of parallels I want to touch on. One being, I thought, a very clear parallel between Ashley and Lars, who are the brothers in this book, with George and Lenny of Mice and Men. And that's because with each of these pairings, you have one figure who is very protective of another figure who is hindered in some capacity. Someone who is not able to really survive and defend themselves. And so they have this protective figure with them at all times that also takes on that role of alpha. Beyond that, though, I don't think there's any more similarities, just that kind of dynamic. And then also when Darby was describing how the blizzard was essentially assaulting everyone by having them snowed into this rest stop, at the same time, she was planning on staging an ambush and assault on Lars, which didn't turn out very well. But that was kind of funny how, using the term assault and an ambush, that implies that it was against your will. And of course, they're all stuck there against their will, or are they? And they were trying to take this one member out very early on against his will. So, yeah, I just thought that was interesting. And then omens. There are so many omens from the first page. First of all, the rest stop that they're in, Wanashonu, translates to Big Devil. Sandy is reading a book titled Luck of the Devil, there's this reoccurring discussion, and I guess that could be the motif of the witching hours, which is 3 a.m. There is the van that is parked in the parking lot, that on the side of it, it says, "We finish what we start." And I think that was actually the first thing that I caught on to. Like, that's such a strange saying to have on the side of your van, even if it's for a business or a company. That sounds really ominous, you know? And I think that was the last one. Oh, and then just the light going out at the front door. All of these are like little tiny clues that I think fiction thriller authors are very adept in like sprinkling in their stories, because it just adds to the tension. It adds to your suspense, because you know that all of these things, it's something bad is going to happen or has been happening, or like, has happened, and you got to figure out what's going on. But it creates a very dark setting. Okay, so just a couple themes before we get to my review. The first theme is deceit. First of all, let me just say this. There was a point when I was reading this book when I thought I couldn't trust any of the characters, which was unfortunate. But it's one of those books. I don't even want to compare it to anything else, because I'm trying very hard not to spoil the ending. But there is a level of deceit that almost every character in this book undertakes. Whether it's for good or bad purposes, you shouldn't find yourself really believing anything until maybe like halfway through the book. But there are a lot of twists and turns. Now, when we talk specific things, Ashley is someone who I caught on to right away, just like, because again, he talks in very strange riddles, and he was demonstrating a card trick called the Mexican turnover, where essentially you're just switching the cards out, turning over one, switching out the other one in plain view. And so he's actually saying this out loud. He's describing the trick. Who says that? Oh yeah, I'm flipping the card in plain view. What else are you doing in plain view? You know what I mean? There's also this coded language going on where this is how some of our characters communicate with each other and give orders without details and information without alerting the other people. And then, of course, the classic just withholding information in order to maintain your cover. So it can be argued that some characters that are classified as bad by the end of the book weren't necessarily bad. They just never told the truth, but they weren't really ever asked the truth. So, and then last theme is decisions. Of course, the decisions that our characters make dictate the path that they go along. But what we find is that Darby in particular is very good at kind of making those decision trees. I remember they had us make them when I was in college for like a business class, and how just choosing one or the other leads you down, like a different path, and then you just kind of make this big huge tree to see what company or stock you should pick or something like that. But she was always calculating in her mind the next steps of her action, because it was determining the survival. She was essentially simulating the outcomes of various decisions, whether it would be to go out this door versus this door, or walk in this direction, whatever that may be, in order to understand the outcome better and the impact as well. But also there's this decision that is consistently available to ignore and just maintain bystander status. And so that's one of those internal conflicts where it's like, be selfish and maintain your survival and act like nothing's happening, or be the hero. there are a lot of decisions being made. And between Ashley and Darby, those are the ones that we got to see the most, I would say. And how they weigh the pros and the cons and try to outmaneuver each other. It was borderline funny, but within the, like, reading the book, it was still super suspenseful. So that was an important one. Okay, so the film adaptation. It was released this year, so 2022 on Hulu. You know what? It really hurts my heart that these books, because even the book like The Woman in the Window, if you go back and listen to my review, I'm pretty sure I said almost the same thing. The adaptation was terrible. And it was terrible because there's so much complexity and intensity in this book that was not pulled over into the film. And I think I've uncovered why, because there is a lack of nuance within the characters. There's a lack of development within the characters. What they did was they stripped the characters down to their very basic attributes. So, for example, just because I was talking about him earlier, someone like Ashley, who in the book has a lot going on with him, and we find out a lot of information by the end, but in the movie, because this is someone who overall was kind of in a lot of bad stuff, they even added some stuff onto him to make him like just the basic bad guy. And in the movie, they made Darby the basic protagonist. I don't know. It's difficult to watch an adaptation understanding where the characters and the production could have went. You know, I just feel like they always fall short for some reason, unless maybe it's a series. I don't know. Maybe I need to look at that more, because maybe it's because it's a film. I don't know. I just don't like how they cut these characters down to one-dimensional, one motive, one character trait type of situation. Ugh. I did not like it. But it's only an hour and a half. It's on Hulu. So if you already have Hulu, you might as well just stream it if you've already read the book. I watched it in the Starbucks parking lot. I almost fell asleep. So I don't know. It's just kind of rushed. It's rushed. It's, you know, to each his own. But as far as the book goes, I thought it was great. Overall, there are great reviews everywhere on this book. So I think the people that read this did, tend to enjoy it. Definitely suspenseful. I think that where the interest lies for me is that it's difficult to track the character arcs. One, because of lack of information towards, the very beginning. And two, because there's more than one reason to do X, So I enjoyed that. I like it when the characters have more than one side to them. It makes them really interesting. Now, in case you're one of those people who's worried about being hooked onto a thriller, this one actually gives motive to the reader to continue reading in the first chapter. And that's with the revealing that there is a child that's been kidnapped and we got to figure out who did it. So yeah, I enjoyed this book. Is it a reread? Sure. It's not one of the books I'm going to give away or throw away. I don't think I'll reread it for fun, but I'll keep it on my bookshelf. It was very decent. I enjoyed it. So I only have one takeaway. That is, if someone is talking in riddles around you, or it seems like everything that they're saying has a double meaning, they're probably crazy or have some type of sociopath tendencies. Either way, you need to walk away because you're about to be in a really tough situation. So that's all. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode. Next week, I will be releasing the Bridgerton Book 2 episode. right before Bridgerton season 2 premieres. So stay tuned for that. Other than that, thank you so much for tuning in. I look forward to seeing everyone next week. Thank you. Have a good weekend.